District 834, school board business meeting dated July 12th, 2018. Can I please have a roll call?
Certainly. Board Chair Pelletier.
Here.
Vice Chair Stibland.
Here.
Treasurer Pearson.
Here.
Clerk O'Loughlin.
Here.
Director Hepner.
Here.
Director Potacek.
Here.
You have quorum.
Thank you, Barb. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next on the agenda is our district mission statement and school board goals. I believe I gave the mission statement to Sarah Stibland, please.
Very good. The mission of Stillwater Area Public Schools, in partnership with students, family, and community, is to develop curious individuals who are active and engaged leaders in an ever-changing world by challenging all students as they travel along their personalized learning pathways.
Thank you. And school board goals to Paula O'Loughlin.
Yes. The Stillwater Area Public Schools Board of Education ensures outstanding learning opportunities for the social, emotional, and academic growth of every student in our school district through authentic partnerships and meaningful communication with our community, parents, and students. Every decision is made with a commitment to equity for all students and for future generations impacted by our actions. We provide our stakeholders with regular updates on student achievement, along with continual plans to enhance student learning in our district. We ensure that our systems of management and oversight are clearly defined. We invite ongoing dialogue and partnership with our community to learn from their knowledge and to enhance learning for our students.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Could I please have a motion and a second?
So moved. I'll second.
Director Loughlin and Stibland, thank you. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda tonight is the superintendent's report, and to that I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Pontrelli.
Thank you. Director Pearson and I are chuckling because my notes are kind of soggy, so I'll do my best, as am I.
As are we.
Kristen Hoheisel and Annette Selman were invited by our Washington County Sheriff's Office to attend an annual briefing on the I Love You Guys Foundation. This foundation was started by parents who tragically lost a daughter in a Colorado school shooting. The briefing promotes school safety practices and provides excellent resources for the school district. Director Hoheisel and Director Selman will be working with several components of our emergency response system, and will report back to the board in the fall on our progress with the things that are happening over the summer. Also, our teachers participated in a full week of literacy training. Our teaching staff and principals were working extremely hard this week on this initiative. Special thanks to Karen Latteral, who's been here before sharing about the literacy initiative, and Rachel Larson for their leadership and commitment to this important initiative. As a reminder to the board, the training both increases the love of learning for reading and directly addresses your World's Best Workforce goals for Read Well by third grade. On Monday, I also attended with Mayor McComber a Council of City Mayors on Monday in Minneapolis. And the meeting brought together mayors from around the state and superintendents to discuss barriers to creating more effective learning environments within our school districts and how to provide more safe and welcoming environments for our students. It was just a beginning of conversation, but I really want to thank Mayor McComber for the invitation. I'll look forward to more conversations with she and other mayors about that. This week we attended Summer Tuesdays. Summer Tuesdays was a beautiful, hot evening, unlike this evening. And we really enjoyed being able to connect with people. I wanted to thank Chris Freichels and our communications team. They set up the booth for us and get everything set. So I would invite board members to come and spend a little time with us. It's really a fun way to connect with the community. And then finally, I wanted to give a shout out and share a note of thanks for Barb Nickel. Many of you have met her, and she's been filling in for Carissa Keister, who's on a maternity leave with her new baby, Emily. Barb has done a fabulous job keeping us afloat while Carissa's been off, and we'll look forward to welcoming Carissa back in next week. So thank you to Barb for her continued work with the school district. With that, I'd like to move on to, I think we have mostly baseball team members here. So if you would come forward, and we'd just like to read a little bit and then have you just share who you are and some thoughts about your season with us. Our Stillwater baseball team wrapped up an amazing season as state champs. They shut out Minnetonka 4-0, led by pitcher Drew Gilbert's 15 strikeouts. The Ponies finished out the season with 20 state season wins. It's the team's first state championship since 1991. Way to go, Ponies. Tell us your name and your grade level and anything else you want to share with the board, that would be great.
And your position.
I'm Cody Vensky. I was a catcher and a senior this year. I think that's it.
I'm James Kurtz. I'm a junior and I was a catcher this year.
I'm Noah Kunze. I was first base and I'm a junior. I'll be a senior next year.
I'm Mitch Novak. I'm a junior and I'm going to be a senior next year.
And position?
Shortstop and second base.
Nick Seaman, and I was a junior this year in second base.
And I'm Mike Parker, and I'm the varsity coach, and extremely blessed to work with these guys every day. It was a really special season for our boys. We had our banquet last night, and it was emotional. It was, I guess, all I ever had hoped for as a coach, to be with all the seniors that we had on our team, and to hug them and to think about what it's going to be like 20 years from now when we have our reunion and we come back. And I really thought the bond that these guys had, the leadership that our seniors showed, and the talent of many of our players really showed through, and it was awesome to see the support of the community. We saw, we've had people come up to us at drive-thrus. We had a fire truck escort through town when we came back, and we had so many people at the game. We outnumbered Minnetonka probably 2-1, and it was a huge advantage to have all of those ex-baseball players and all of those parents of the youth baseball players there. It hopefully will continue the tradition. Our guys, and there's only a few here tonight, but they've been doing a great job of going out in the community. They've gone to Little League practices with their medals on to meet the kids. They've gone to games. We'll be doing some other things in the future here.
We have some more players here.
We have some more players. Yeah. Just say your name, what position, and what year you are.
Okay. Holton King, outfield, class of 2019.
Noah Potter, class of 19, outfield.
So I guess in closing, I just, Cody come up. Cody is one of our captains, and Cody had 2 wins in the state tournament. He got both of the wins in game 1 and game 2, and he's just one of those leaders I wanted to especially recognize. Had a great year. He's going to play baseball at Scholastica. But really, I could tell, just wanted everything for his teammates, and incredibly humble guy. So a great group of kids, and we thank you for all the support from the school district and the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would anyone like to ask a couple of questions or comments?
Do you have any other seniors and perhaps their plans now?
We have our seniors are all going on to college next year. What I thought was really special about our seniors is there's only 2 of them that are continuing to play baseball. So they knew that this was their last season. And they didn't have any ego about what they were doing or trying to prove. They were doing whatever it took for the team to win. And I thought that's what really made this group special, is the seniors were going to Madison, we're going to the U of M, St. Thomas. and all these different places, not to play baseball, but to continue their academics. So this was the end of their career. They got to finish it with a win. And in talking with them, just they said they just felt light afterwards. Like they'd worked their whole life, they've lifted and done all these things, and then to win their final game, and they're kind of done with it, and they go out with this special time has really been cool.
Cool. Thank you.
Anyone else? George?
Just one question. We get individuals here occasionally at board meetings who complain about the amount of money that we spend on athletics. And since you're here tonight, could you just tell us what the baseball program gets from the athletic department to support the program?
Yeah, we get $250.
Okay, thank you.
And that doesn't buy enough baseballs for our varsity team. So that's, and the rest of it's fundraised, and it's fundraised by these guys and the families. And we have to raise a lot of money, but now it's just almost part of the tradition that we're going to have to raise money, and I know there's some changes that are going to happen, possibly to help with uniforms and things like that. But right now we fundraise for all of our uniforms, all of our helmets, even safety gear that we need for the team.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? Shelley?
I couldn't be at the game, but I watched the entire thing on live stream on my couch. And you guys, I was as proud of you as I would have been of my kids. You did such a fabulous job, and I was proud of you, and really way to go. It was really fun to watch, and super fun that we won, so good job.
Yeah.
Dr. O'Loughlin?
So congratulations. I played sports in high school, and I think, though, so much has changed in terms of just the workload that students have right now. And so I would love to hear from the students, if you're willing, just how do you navigate and balance just that student-athlete duality?
It's gotten a little harder, like as you progress through school, it gets harder. There's some late nights where, you have a big test in a couple days that you have to study for, but you also know you can't miss practice. So it's really just a balancing act. I mean, you have to know what has to be done versus what you can put off for a couple days. But it's not too bad if you manage it right, so.
Thank you.
I have just a couple of quick things. This is, first of all, this is the moment of every meeting that I cry, but I'm going to keep it together tonight, I hope. I just wanted to comment on, first of all, the gentleman, the catcher. What is your name, honey? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Cody Vensky.
Cody, so I remember, I believe it was you in your baseball gear at the scholarship night, I think, multiple academic scholarships. And, there may not be a lot of people in the audience, but they're watching on this video, and I just want to commend you for being a wonderful gentleman and an academic and a good person. And to that, I'm going to also share with the group and people who are watching that this group of young men, they came to my son's team, and you have no idea, you may not know, maybe you do know what that means for these young boys. And you give them excitement, you give them hope, and you took, and now I'm crying, but you took the time out of your day, and I know you're busy, and just know what a difference you made, and thank you so much, and congratulations. We are so proud of you, so proud. So thank you so much.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you.
It doesn't appear that we have our softball team, but I would like to just still read
Say
the
something.
statement.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Stay dry.
I have to wait a while. We'd also like to congratulate the girls softball team who won the state championship. The unseeded Ponies defeated number 1 seed Park of Cottage Grove 5-1 to cap off a remarkable comeback season. The team hit a hot streak in the playoffs, having only won 2 of their last 13 games in the regular season. Pitcher Allison Benning, catcher Terry Shute, infielder Tatiana Tabaco were named all-tournament team. It's Stillwater's 5th state champions. So we want to recognize the women's softball team, too, for their efforts. That was a pretty amazing story also.
Jennifer?
Yes.
What struck me, I was running today and I was thinking about the baseball team and I was thinking about the softball team. And what stuck out with me is they're two very different stories. You guys were rated very high and stayed there, managed to win the last game to prove you're the best team in the state. But the softball team is a different story in many ways, and I think George would agree particularly. It's kind of a coach's dream. A team that's not playing up to it or hasn't arrived, and they come out of nowhere as the Cinderella team to pull off the championship. And I think that says a lot about character of individuals. I think that says a lot about coaching, in addition to keeping them there, because that's also a challenge as well. So just a narrative. It probably touches on what George was hinting at earlier. And both George and I have been involved in a lot of coaching, and sometimes what the public doesn't completely realize, many do, is how much kids learn in life-sharing situations on the athletic fields and in a variety of ways. And I think both of these stories tonight really characterize that. So thank you both, and thanks to the softball team and their wonderful coaching staff. And wow, do you make us proud this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Great comments. Thank you. All right, so moving on to the open forum. Do we have anyone for the open forum tonight?
No speakers this evening.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight, items A through F, we have minutes of June 21, 2018 school board meeting, minutes of June 22nd, 2018 school board meeting, disbursement register June 14th through the 30th of 2018, Human Resources Personnel Report, amend polling locations and combined polling locations for 2018, and identify official with authority for MDE. Could I get a motion and a second?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Director Hepner with a second by Director Pearson. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. 6-0, apology. All right, moving on to reports. The first report of the night is the second reading of School Board Policies 209 to 215 by the Policy Working Group. I believe that we'll turn over to policy. George?
Sarah, I think, is going to take this.
Okay.
You're 209, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Actually, I've kind of forgotten about that. The purpose of policy number 209 is the Code of Ethics for the school board. I'll just go ahead and read that top part. The purpose of this policy is to assist the individual school board member in understanding his or her role as part of a school board and in recognizing the contribution that each member must make to develop an effective and responsible school board. We discussed this last time.
Second reading. This is the second reading.
This is the second reading for 209. So we had the first reading at our last meeting. We had some discussion about some things and we made some changes. Should I go through those?
No, if nobody has any.
Would anybody like me to go through the changes, or have you had a chance to look at that? Or if anyone has any questions or comments?
Director Potacek?
Yes, I have a series of comments, and I've tried to put these in writing, and I sent each of those to you, but in case you didn't get it, I brought copies.
Okay, thank
And
you.
so there's a statement I'd like to go. I think
did you
there's
send this?
about 10 this afternoon.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, all of us were very busy yesterday, so I didn't get to it earlier,
Just one page.
although I've been thinking about it. But a couple things strike me, and a couple things that I don't think are reflected in this whole series
Mike,
of
I'm sorry,
policies.
it's just
Yes.
one page.
Is it just this one page?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
okay.
sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
And again, what I want to bring up is this, because I think these are a couple of significant themes that are not represented in these policies and ought to be. And the first one has to do with a memorandum that we received from Peter Michael, who was part of our legal defense team, and he shared a memorandum with us twice on September 30th, 2016, and then again on April 13th, over a year or roughly a year later. And many of those current policies, I think, are not in alignment with his findings. He did share with me that this was a public document and that I could share it with others, so that's why I bring it forward. I have the whole document, and I think most board members do, if not all of them, and share it. But particularly, I'd like to reread, and I think I've mentioned this before, many of our current policies are not in alignment with his findings, for example, and these are his conclusions. They are taken, quote, from his writing, and I believe in context. Number one, a board member has a First Amendment right, the widest latitude to speak out on controversial matters of public interest. No board policy that purports to restrain such speech is enforceable. Number two, under the First Amendment, the right to dissent is sacrosanct. The answer to the opponent's speech is more speech. Other than members exercising their own free speech rights, the board may not take adverse action to retaliate against the board member for exercising her First Amendment rights to speak out on controversial matters, including criticizing district policies, decisions, or other board members. And as a candidate for election, because when he originally wrote the original on this, it was during an election year, and this is also an election year. As a candidate for election, a sitting board member enjoys the broadest First Amendment protections for her campaign speech. And so as I looked through this, there were a number of areas that bothered me in those statements. As a goal, as a general rule, I'm okay with that. Like when we say something like, you should never make a disparaging comment of a board member. I think all of us try to follow that, but sometimes when you give any message out, there's two levels. There's the sender, who may have one motivation, and then the receiver, who's maybe quite different. In addition to this, there's a very powerful book that I read a long time ago. I hate to mention how long ago, in a political theory class by John Stuart Mill. It's called On Liberty. And Mill wrote this back in 1859. And I think one sentence captures the whole meaning of what I think is free speech. If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person was of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. So again, these are powerful thoughts. I believe strongly in free speech is the best defense against bad decisions in all areas of life, and I think the board is included. Free debate sorts good ideas from bad ones.
Thank you for that, Director Patel. Can I just ask a question to that? Just for clarity, because this is the first time I'm seeing this today, are you referring to, is this a general tone type of comment, or are you referring to specific line items in some of these policies that you would recommend that the policy group consider changing?
The latter, what you just said.
So,
and what I can do is, as I've gone through this, I've noted places where that is, but rather than read, because we said we didn't want to wordsmith at this meeting, so rather than do that, what I can do is this: I can share my remarks, like where I have a question or word that would strike that.
Okay.
And they go from this series 209 that I think goes up to about 215, 2015 or something.
Can I?
Yep,
Can I just ask some clarification? Mike, I appreciate your, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I think that's powerful ideas. Those are powerful ideas, powerful words, and I happen to agree. I wonder if we can be specific about in this policy 209, are there specific ones within this policy, specific lines that you would like to apply these ideas to?
Yes, and I can give you probably in policy 209 about a half a dozen considerations. I don't know if you want to take the time. If you do, I'd gladly
I would, because we will be meeting as a policy group, and then we will at least know that I'll make a note of it.
Director O'Loughlin?
And I would ask, just pursuant to the email that Director Stivlin sent out, if we can follow that protocol to answer those questions, if you can provide your rationale, your proposed suggestions, and make the case of why your new proposed language is more compelling than what's currently written. Because I think that was the process that we had outlined, right?
Yep, and when I'm looking at those 4 statements, I think, Mike, you have just done steps number 1 and number 2. Well, maybe we're working on 2. So we need some specifics about which ones you would want to have us look at.
Okay. And I would gladly do that. So I'll give you some spots, and then you can ask me if you want me to give you more rationale.
Okay.
What I'm saying, generally, I fall back on this.
But that doesn't help us when we get to the specifics. I mean,
Yes.
we don't want to find ourselves in the meeting trying to guess at what particular lines you would suggest a change for.
Okay, let me do this.
And we don't need to get it now. We're meeting a week from tomorrow.
Yep.
Yes, and I have those outlined as well. But like I say, I didn't want to come across as kind of nitpicking as much as to tell you why.
I would like to just interject. I think that's wonderful. I appreciate hearing, the means to the end from your perspective, and I do appreciate that. But just giving them some substance so they can make these policy, specific recommendations, possibly prior to your meeting next week. Is that a fair course of action?
Would you prefer just emailing us?
Sure.
With your recommendations?
You
I
bet.
think that would be just fine.
May I ask a follow-up
Director
question?
O'Loughlin?
So you had mentioned, I think it was number 2, about make no disparaging remarks. So can you please share with me what the rationale is for being able to make disparaging remarks and how that's going to help our board be a better governing body?
Number 1, I'm not for disparaging remarks. My purpose, others' purpose, I think, is civility, disagreements, but not contentious in there. So my point is, what number 3 raises the biggest question for me, what's a disparaging remark?
So just in case the public is watching, we are looking at 209 right now.
And it presently reads number 3.
Item 3.
Item C3. To me, and
Start with
specifically
C. Start with what C says, because that's the lead.
C states, to maintain relations with other members of the school board, I will, and it lists 6 items. And we're looking specifically at number 3. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you have the most recent? See, this is the updated one.
Well, there's about 3 different ones that I've come across, and it's been hard for me to keep up with what's the most recent.
So we did make some changes, and so in the interest of clarity, I'll just read.
Let me do this, if I may. Give me a second. I've got them right in front of me.
Okay.
And I'll try to pull them up, and I may have, and my point is, I also did this in these statements here, so I need to just pull up.
So while you pull that up, I'll just read it out loud.
Yes,
C3
I
says,
got it now.
Recognize
Correct.
that this is how it's read as we have it now. This is our proposed change. This is the most current version of C3. Recognize that disparaging remarks about fellow school board members undermines the board's ability to govern.
Director Potacek?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so,
Because I'm saying it's a whole different statement
And-
when you put recognize.
And I think, just to inform the conversation just a little bit, when the policy working group met, we did talk about this one quite a bit, and we focused on that word disparaging remarks. We felt that, and I would be open to more discussion about this if people don't agree, but we felt that disparaging remarks are not constructive criticism. They're actually really hurtful or personal in nature of other board members. And that this is not really talking about dissent so much as it is being respectful to one another as board members.
would anyone
You
else like
guys
to
agree with
speak?
that?
Would anyone else have a?
That's right. That's well said.
Okay.
Yeah, Director O'Loughlin.
So I think, so that helps me better understand a little bit where you're coming from. I think that I want to be transparent in terms of my concern, because this is reminiscent of conversations we had when we were doing policy work in the past, where it came down to, okay, what is the meaning of respectful? What does the meaning of open-minded, and we got into semantics, and I think that, for me personally, that does not really serve us well in terms of trying to take a word, because we could do that all night, right, with every word in this book, and parse it out in such a way that's really taking the intent from it. So I think maybe if you do have other concerns about certain words, if you can give us some of that qualifying context, so we have an idea of, because for me, disparaging is, as I understand it, both in the dictionary text and other, conversational texts, the meaning to me is quite clear. So I think that just so that the policy group can have some better direction from you in terms of your interpretations of certain words. That would be, I think, very helpful.
And I appreciate and respect, and again, I've got it on this copy, but I've got about 2 or 3 other copies, so I'm not always sure which one I should be looking at. But using the word recognizing this is very, very different than make no disparaging.
I would like to agree with that. I think that it's a much more, I actually think it has more power and credence to say this new verbiage, recognizing that disparaging remarks. I think that is, I think it's wonderfully worded. I think it's much better than what it was before, and I'm thankful that this came to us in this capacity, so looks very good. Director Stevlin? Or Pearson, sorry, I didn't see your.
That's okay. I think,
No, that's fine, thanks.
I think maybe part of where this comes from is a few years ago there was maybe some accusation that people were being disparaging or other words, and it is hard to interpret. I think that's where this comes from.
I agree.
So just to note that that's I think where it stems from.
Director Stevlin?
Sorry.
That's
So
okay.
what I was just going to, as we were just discussing, I was thinking, I think this, because we did talk about it a lot in the policy working group, it became clear to me what we're talking about is how we treat one another in our words, both here and elsewhere. We try to be respectful even if we disagree. So that to me is what this is speaking to. However, what you just talked about with us today, with your references, I think those are really powerful things for us to remember. And I would maybe say perhaps we could add a policy here that just reflects some of what you are trying to express with this presentation. Because when I look through this, I actually don't see that idea put here in words that specifically. It kind of gets close to it in some of these policies, but not really specifically. I wonder if you'd be willing to maybe write what you have expressed with us tonight in a specific policy that we could add, perhaps even in the first section as the general statement, as a member of the school board I will, or it could go almost anywhere.
Director Potacek?
Sure. I'm very open to that. Again, yeah, I can do that. I'd be more than happy to do that. Other comments or something, other feedback that would help me when I go to work on the draft of it. Paul?
Director O'Loughlin?
Well, I was just going to, remind us too that this is one attorney's interpretation, right? I think that the policy working group for the last several years has, in essence, adopted strictly what comes from MSBA. And while there might be some, different perspectives in terms of that, I want to be careful that we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater in the sense of that anything that has to do with speech, that we're somehow not going to have some kind of parameters and guidelines about the ways in which we need to conduct ourselves, especially when it comes to, one's ethical behavior, right?
Director Potacek?
I think, and perhaps that's a difference in philosophy, but I think when you set up the code of ethics, that's a target we shoot for and ought to shoot for. And in our behavior, interactions with each other, we should attempt to do that. Where it becomes, I think, a fear of mine is when it may be considered as a violation and some sort of penalty or criticism is directed at individuals. Because I'm saying that's why when you run into or try to define, and I know what you're trying to do, and I sympathize with that when it says recognize, because I think all of us will try to do that. I have no problem with that. But when you make a statement like make no, then I'm saying, wow, that's a different issue. And as we know, because I was one of those who was accused at times of doing this sort of thing, that that can come back to haunt us. And I'm saying when you start talking majorities or minorities or individuals versus the collective board, that's a pretty important concept. A concept that I learned a long time ago. I was an American history teacher for 18 years. And a political science concept that is true of democracies is what's called the loyal opposition. The fact that you can be loyal to the country and you can disagree politically with another party.
I want to thank you, Director Potacek, for bringing your comments. I think they're valid and should be taken with true consideration. I wanted to just quickly, if I can find this thing again, wanted to just remind you that they took out the make no, and I think to definitely that's a good change, and I think you'd be assuming you're happy with that they, based on what you just said there, that they took that part out of the policy, and maybe going forward, your comments, if you could just maybe make them some form of specificity to that, and get back to the policy working group before their next meeting so they can.
And your next meeting is when again, please?
Friday.
A week from tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Are we ready to move on, or are we still in the second reading? Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the next report, the first reading of the Series 300 policy.
No.
Yeah, we have
we're still with this? Oh.
we got the first policy done.
Nice
there.
try, though. We do appreciate that.
We have 5 more to get through.
Oh.
But I think these are Paula's. Is that correct?
So we're not going to address any other questions around 209. We're just going to let Mike send us his other comments.
Nobody said anything.
No one said anything, so my thought is that Mike can kind of formalize his comments and send them to you.
I know you said you had a half a dozen or so.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so you want to just email those to us with your rationale?
If that's the way you'd rather take it, I got some others that are slightly different.
Are they part of 209?
Yes.
Okay, it's up to you. Do you want to go for it right now, or do you want to?
You tell me.
Go for, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, go back to
Bet that
209.
we would be out here before midnight.
Yeah, I'll say 1 o'clock now.
Okay, we're still on 209.
Yeah.
Okay. If you would, turn to page 2 of 209
Okay.
and look at D2.
Advocate for financial support for the school district's programs.
Yes. I think it's very clear that I have in the past and will continue to advocate for financial support for school district programs. What if we get a member on the board who doesn't believe that their job is to advocate for more funding for schools, whether it be locally, statewide, or nationally?
But Mike, if we go down that path, look at the next one. Insist that business transactions of the district be ethical and open. What if I say, no way, they should be unethical? We could do that with every single one of those, I think.
Yeah.
Director Potacek?
The difference is this. What you said is not only it's illegal.
Oh, I don't know. Okay, they should be closed, ethical and closed. You can...
Director O'Loughlin?
So, Mike, I'm going to be really frank with you. When I was a parent, before I was on the board and watching the meetings, I know you worked very diligently with other board members. I don't know if you were chair of the policy working group, but I know you were on the policy working group for a while. And so what I'm trying to reconcile is the difference between when you were working on the policies then and now, because I'm not hearing so much actual concerns, but more just these hypotheticals. And I just, to George's point, I'm just concerned that's not going to be able to get us to where we need to be able to have functional, operational policies for our district.
Director Stivland?
Thank you. Okay, so I really want to hear what your primary and broadly stated concern regarding this particular point of policy is.
Yes.
I think I understand what you're saying, that maybe you want some more specific or clear language describing what the role actually is. And I could see a place where it's not just about advocating for more financial support, but also something about being fiscally responsible, making good decisions. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just a, endless sea of money out there that we have to just keep fighting for or something like that. Is that kind of where you're getting at?
Kind of.
Okay.
I've been on a forum. I've run for election to the school board 3 times. In at least 2 of those elections, there were candidates who disagreed on spending.
Okay.
And I've disagreed with them publicly because I've been an advocate for that and gave my rationale whys. Now, several of those individuals weren't elected. Had they been, and that's a possibility, that we have somebody who comes on the board who's very fiscally conservative. And they're opposed to, quote, increased taxes or however you want to frame it.
Can you phrase this?
Right, that might,
Could you maybe look at that
that's fine.
specific one? Let's look at D2, which is the one we're talking about. It says advocate for financial support for the school district's programs. Can you right now
Adequate's a big comment, yeah.
advocate for financial support for the school district's programs? Can you think of a better way to say that? And can you share that with us now and give us a rationale for it?
I think George had a question as well, so I'll try to catch those both.
No, my only question was if we have these programs, how would they be paid for unless somebody's advocating for them? I could see if you said advocate for more money, that doesn't make sense, but financial support for the school district's programs, that apparently means we want to support the programs that are in place. In meeting my responsibilities to the community, that's what I will do. Advocate for money so we can support the district's programs.
Yeah. The problem I have with this, George, is when you put that as a responsibility, that's what a good board member looks like, I think that's wrong. Would I try to convince if we had an individual on our board who took that position? Yes. Would I try to convince the public as I knock on doors or speak at forums on adequately funding public schools? Yes. But if someone challenges me on that, or someone takes that position, and they get a significant political following to put them on the board where they want to publicize and advocate that position, I think they've got a right to do that.
What if could I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I'm looking at D4. D4 doesn't have any changes. Right now, it states, strive to uphold my responsibilities and accountability to the taxpayers in my school district. If we were to think about those two in conjunction with one another, and even if we were to read them together, it would say advocate for financial support for the school district's programs and demonstrate accountability to the taxpayers in my school district. Would that serve the purpose of what your concern is?
It may. You know, I'm not
Is that
sure.
getting closer to what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, and I think what you're attempting to do here, general statement of philosophy, you're talking about what's ethical, and I'm saying it's got to be pretty broad umbrella.
I would just like to interject. So just in reading what Director Stivlin has requested of the board when it comes to these recommendations is that we provide specific provide specific verbiage about what we would like to the verbiage to be. And I feel like right now we're going back and forth and we're going to be here until 2 in the morning and not be productive. So I think what I'm hearing from you is something more along the lines of, to your point, strive to advocate for financial support. It gives it a little bit more, wiggle room, so to speak. But I feel that at this point, if we don't have specific verbiage to go with, we're going to waste each other's time. So,
and I can provide that.
I have made a note of this concern.
Thank you.
And we will bring it up in the policy working group and try to work on it. But I definitely would love to have some specific verbiage in an email if you can.
Well, we have to. Given the 4 steps that you put down, we have to have, we can't guess at what this should be changed to.
And that's why because we really do respect your point of view and we want to hear your words and we want to consider those. So, yeah, we do really need something specific. So, and I think, were there some other ones, or?
Do you have specific suggestions, or?
Right, and
And we can just touch on them if you want to, and that's fine. But just know that we do want
I think what I'll do at
suspense.
this point, in the interest of civility and levity, is capture those in email, send them to you. If you have questions, if they're not clear,
Okay.
and we may discuss it at our next board meeting, and I can add to it if I feel there are shortcomings or it hasn't been
Absolutely.
adequately occur. I do appreciate the opportunity to present my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Great. All right. Okay, so 209, so then it's 209.1. Is that me, or is that?
I think that one's you. I'm on 210.
Oh, okay. I'll do 209.1. Okay. 209.1 is board policy violation. The general statement of this policy is the board and each of its members are committed to faithful compliance with the provisions of the board's policies. The board recognizes that its failure to deal with violations of its policies and board member misconduct risks the loss of public confidence in the board's ability to govern effectively. I do not believe we have any changes to this.
Director Pearson?
So if you go back one page, there was that number 8 that was added and then struck, and we can see that. But then in 209.1, there had been words added, and they must have been struck, and we can't see that. It originally had said something different right under 2. So I don't know if that was just...
Which one under 2?
The old. This was the old language,
209.
and she's saying that wasn't struck the way the one was
It
in the
wasn't struck the
previous.
same.
like
So
this
I can't see on here that anything was there and then wasn't there. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't know if the wrong one was just
Nope,
included or.
that's the way we dropped that blue
Okay.
in the
So-
previous one.
Should this one have been?
It should be marked out.
Because it would be nice to know what has been changed from when we talked last time. If there's
Yeah.
a way to, but I know it gets tricky with all the
Right.
strike-throughs and colors and all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what we did, I'm sorry.
Director Lockman.
I think
Had
what we
it
did
struck
last.
out, and then we went back to the original.
Right.
Right.
And I think what we did last time when we were doing the policies last year is I thought we had decided that board members then would kind of just do their own comparison and contrast with what we're given electronically versus the paper ones, so they could see where, and I hear what you're saying, Shelley, because you're right, it is a lot of, detail to have to follow, but I think that's how we did it for this process.
I think for the most part,
I
they
can
have
put that
been in
back
there.
in. Yeah, I can
The
strike
changes
it
have
and
all been
rewrite.
in there, as
Yep.
far as I know. I think this one maybe just.
Yeah, and
got
it's not a
missed.
big, it's not a big deal. I want to know that I'm seeing what was there and what's been changed and everything.
Great.
Anyone have any other comments?
So are we on 209.1?
Yes.
Comments, questions?
I'll wait
So
for others.
essentially, we are not making any changes to this policy. It is as it was before.
Director Potacek?
Yes, I'm on number 2, Roman numeral 2, and A. And this is the whole area is under what's called addressing a policy violation. The question I have is, when does the board chair know there's a policy violation? Or how?
I can tell you past practice, either when I was chair, either I noticed something and I called the board members' attention to it that I had the conversation with, or other board members approached me and said, here's a policy violation, would you speak to?
Okay, and I'm just trying to follow up clarity. So if something happened tonight and I thought it was a violation of policy by another board member, I would tell the board chair.
Well, I'm just saying, that's the way it happened when I was board chair.
Yes. And then the board chair decides whether there's a violation?
Back when I was board chair, that's what I did.
So it is really up to the board chair, or in some situations, one other board member?
Vice chair, according to that language.
Yes, I got that part of it. So it,
For the conversation part, but I think beyond that, you need a majority board to agree that it's a policy violation.
He is talking about just A.
Oh, just A.
just A. So I'm saying all it takes for it to require a conversation is the board chair deciding, or one or two other members, it doesn't specify here, coming to the board chair and saying I think there's a violation.
I would say it's the board chair, because if one or two other board members come and say, this board member violated this, and the board chair's reading is different from, then the conversation wouldn't take place. Interpretation. But I'd say this puts the onus on the board chair, yes.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
Well, I'm saying if we go with this policy, everybody is re-agreeing to that.
Would you like to suggest a change?
Do you have anything in mind that do you want to say more about that? Are you insinuating that you disagree with this and you have another option that you would like to bring to the board?
Well, what's on my mind is this. I have been a high school principal. I've been a high school administrator. And there are other people in the audience who have been as well. Anytime that you're called in and there's discipline involved, whether it's a student, whether it's a staff member, Something you are entitled to is what's called minimum due process. Minimum due process, even if it's just a chewing out, is you are entitled to a written statement of violation. You are entitled to give your side of the story. And there are generally other steps. Those are the two that come to me most often. Now, there's no way that's mentioned here.
Director Hapner?
I would say that the way the discussion takes place is to ask for that person's side of the story, if you will. That's why there's a private conversation and not a public, you have the conversation, say, here's what has been said to me about this. Why would you do what you're doing? And then you present, or the person you're talking to presents his or her side of the story.
And what I'm looking for is if there is a conversation, a couple things. One, any individual who is asked to do the conversation piece, one, would know what the violation is, both orally and in writing. Secondly, that they would be able to get, and it be spelled out, an opportunity to give their side of the story.
Director Pearson, did you have this?
Well, so I'm wondering if, I don't know that I look at this as a disciplinary action as much as a conversation about, this is what I'm seeing. I think the rest are disciplinary actions, but I don't, if you would ever meet with somebody about a presumed policy violation, was it considered disciplinary or just having a conversation?
There was no discipline that occurred other than the conversation. I don't know if that's the answer, but if you sit down and talk to somebody, you say, here's what some other board members have brought to me. Is there something they're not seeing or again, present your side of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know what the written statement is going to do. I think the idea of that is to keep that at a very basic, I don't know if that's right.
Two parts that I'd see to it, and I'm saying, please consider this. One is don't put it addressing a policy violation, because that assumes that it is, and it may not be. So that's a prejudgment. Secondly, not all individuals, some this is true, some is not. If they're called by the chair and they have a conversation, they don't always hear what's being said. My experience has been when individuals are disciplined, and oftentimes they're entitled to representation, whether it's a parent, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a union rep, you name it. Sometimes the advantage of that is the person who is being inquired of takes a different takeaway than the person who's delivering it. So oftentimes that second person in the room, and in this case, I'm not asking for a second person or a third person in the room. I'm asking just for somewhere on paper, okay, what is it that I'm being accused of? And by whom? Those are all part of minimum due process.
Director Stiveland?
Not who. Typically isn't, the person isn't identified in minimum due process with students at least.
Mm-hmm.
You address the issue, have the conversation, which I think, the conversation is maybe to not go down the road that you're sharing, Mike, because how do you know? You don't really know unless you have a conversation and sit down. I think it's meant to be more informal, and as Shelley said, not a disciplinary thing, just to sit down, because all of us know that there are lots of different perspectives, right? And just because one person has it doesn't mean that that's the whole story.
And can I respond? Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that, because to me that's more discovery than a violation.
Director Stiveland?
In light of everything you've said, I'm trying to get to the kind of to the sense of what you're trying to accomplish, or how we might be able to address what you've stated. I wonder if we could take step 1, or on 2A, it says, addressing a policy violation. So in the event of a member's violation of policy, perhaps we could change that to a concern around policy or something softened. And the first step would be a conversation. And then perhaps we could add a second step where there's a little more formality, where we say something like, in the case of, continual concerns around policy violation with a particular board member. I don't know. I'm not good at picking out words right on the spot, but then a written form, a little bit more structure. So essentially we're adding an extra step, because I think, that first conversation could be like, a board member just says a lot in the meetings and it's really annoying. So maybe they might have a conversation about that. Well, that's not a policy violation, but it's something that the chair should try to get on top of or whatever. But you know what I'm saying? Like, that first step seems more casual, low key, more like just let's try to check in and make something a little bit better. And then the next step would be, okay, wait, we have a situation that's continuing to be a problem, so let's make this a little bit more serious and formal by writing it down, have another conversation or something like that.
Right, maybe something between A and B there. Director Pearson, did you raise your hand?
Well, I was just, which you guys can flesh this out, but it may not work, because if it's still just 1 or 2 people deciding it's a violation, I don't think 1 or 2 people can decide definitively that it's a violation. I think that'd have to be done by majority vote, which would have to be done at a board meeting, which would be the public censure, probably. Mm-hmm. So just discuss that. I'm not sure what would have to happen there.
Kathy Mohenhead, you have some thoughts on this?
I was just going to share a little bit. I think that this process does not rise to the due process level that you would see like with an employee process with the board. This first step that you're seeing on here, I would compare to, I have an employee who keeps coming to work late. I call them in, I tell them, you need to stop coming to work late. Mm-hmm. I don't do a due process. I don't ask them if they came late. I don't ask them why they came late. I said, you did it and you need to stop. That's what this conversation is supposed to be, an informal conversation, just to say, heads up, here's the situation, and it's not acceptable. Yeah. It's not disciplinary in nature. There is no due process part that needs to go with it. And to Shelley's point, when we don't do discipline, there is not necessarily a formal due process. Even on the personnel side, we usually have a conversation, but it's not a formal due process when you're not disciplining all the time. When you get to B, you are looking at more formal, and you're going to have some steps and procedures that you're going to do before you get there. I still don't know that it rises to the formal due process procedures, but there's a process you'd want to set in place.
Director Potachik, is it possible that what you're trying to get at is something in between the conversation, if the person who is not the board member does not agree with the way the conversation ended, or does not feel that they didn't get their points across, or whatever, what have you. And then what would be the next step in that if that conversation didn't end on equal playing field for both, where there was some sort of a closure, and then what is the step between that and then go to the public censure? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Here's what I'm getting at, where my thinking goes. Number one, it's not necessarily a violation. It's a discovery whether a violation did occur.
So address the verbiage there.
Mm-hmm. And you can do that by pulling A out of addressing a policy violation to discovering if a policy violation did occur. It can be a first step. I think where Kathy Moen and I would disagree, I think it's different if you have an employer and an employee. That's a different relationship. But what I'm saying here is, if your attempt, and Kathy, where I think you and I might be in agreement, is that most board individuals, if they were called in saying, you know what, what you've been saying or what you did here is suspect or possible violation. This is what I've been told. And you sat down and had the discussion. And you did those types of things that I would recommend. One, what is it the individual is being charged with? And again, the attempt to put it on paper is just so when they walk out or 25 hours later, they go home to their wife or spouse, they say, gee, what do you think? And I think that would help everybody in terms of that. And I think also what has to be part of that is the individual ought to be able to say their side of the case. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to go to the first step of a policy violation then and escalate to going to the board. I think most people coming out of those types of situations, they're not just going to blow it off.
Okay, so in light of trying to make sure we understand where you're coming from, that we actually capture your thoughts and try to be able to address this in our next meeting. And also just to kind of wrap this up so we can move on. Are you okay with us taking a look at the first line and softening that a little bit so that it doesn't rise to the level of violation of policy? So that really is more describing the nature of just a simple, comfortable, low-key conversation between the chair and a particular board member where there's an issue. May be a policy, may not be a policy issue, may just be a simple like check-in, way to improve your work as a board member. Is that kind of, so that first conversation is more like, the chair's responsibility is to kind of check in with the board members and make sure they're doing things right, more casual. But then we could add a second step where it's a little bit more formal.
Here's what I would ask for consideration. And again, I'll try to make it very specific.
Specific, yeah.
One is to move it before addressing a policy violation. And I'm saying there to say, and I'm not quite exactly sure how it's going to read, but discovering whether a policy violation has occurred. And what would happen is that if the board chair or one board member or whatever thinks that there is a policy violation, then that investigation is a conversation in private setting between the offending member and the board chair or vice chair in the lieu of the chair, and then describe what that conversation involved. What are the steps?
Director O'Loughlin?
So I just want to make sure we're not losing the intention behind this policy. It's entitled Board Policy Violation. And when you read the general statement of policy, what I've been hearing you saying, which I'm not judging the merit of it, but I'm hearing that's something different. That is almost how to determine whether or not something is a violation. I just want to make sure we're not compromising the integrity of what this actual policy is. So maybe MSBA or others could help us, and maybe when the policy group convenes next Friday, we can have that conversation. But I would be really hesitant and really reticent to really upend and, like I said, compromise what this policy actually is setting out to do. So maybe we can just have that.
Director Sevlin?
I agree with you. I think that's a really good point. We got to remember that this is a board policy violation. However, in light of everything that Mike has shared, I do think we could strengthen the language around the process by which we determine if a policy violation has occurred, which I think that sounds like that's Mike's primary concern here, is that we don't have a clearly defined process for determining whether a policy violation has occurred. So we don't set out these policies just so one board member can just, decide that other board members are wrong. We're supposed to be a team, so we can clarify what that process should look like, maybe a little bit. Is that correct, Director Potachnik?
I think you're on the right track. And so I feel that I've been able to voice a concern and a perspective. I'm comfortable with that. I think the next step is consideration by the policy committee.
I'm really glad you have, I'm really glad you have voiced this concern. I took some good notes. I think we will have a good conversation, but I would also, in this case, really, really encourage you to try to maybe put forward some suggested language that would reflect, as well as you can, what you're looking for.
Thank you.
All right, I think I have the next one. 210.
We're done with this one.
Conflict of interest. The purpose of this policy is to observe state statutes regarding conflicts of interest and to engage in school district business activities in a fashion designed to avoid any conflict of interest or the appearance of impropriety. You'll notice that we did, thank you to Mrs. Prue, correct some of that formatting that was a bit off in the paper format. You'll see that reflected online. And I believe this one, there were not any items for discussion, so as such, it was not discussed. Any other things that have come up since then on 210? All right, moving on, 211. The purpose of this policy is to provide guidance as to the school district's position, rights, and responsibilities when a civil or criminal action is pending against the school district or a school board member, district employee, or student. Similar to the previous one, this one did not have any discussion items for the policy working group to consider. Has anything come up since? Okay, policy 212, school board member development. The purpose of this is in recognition of the need for continuing in-service training and development for its members. The purpose of this policy is to encourage the members of the school board to participate in professional development activities designed for them so they may perform their responsibilities. All right, there are a few notes here that you'll see.
Can I make just a quick comment?
Yes.
We did talk about this one a little bit, and I want to just point out
Thanks.
that we have added a B under the general statement of policy that new school board members will be provided with an orientation. That's something that I think where we could, define. We need to define what that's going to look like, but we did not have that there before, and I think it's helpful just to have it in policy that we're going to take some kind of steps to make sure that we have a robust orientation for new board members so they know what to do when they get here.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, you'll see we did take in we did implement some of the changes and suggestions that were made at the first reading, so you'll see that reflected in 2A. And then Shelley, I think you were the one that brought up with the self-evaluation, so that's also in there.
I lost it here. Would you just read 212 where it talks about that? Just a change part.
Oh, we talked about within 180 days to attend phase 1 and phase 2, and shall attend instead of making it more of a mandate. That's really not enforceable. And then, as Sarah said, we added that new school board members will be provided with an orientation and then the self-evaluation. And
we will conduct a self-evaluation. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on 212? All right, 213, school board committees. The school board has determined that certain permanent standing committees or subcommittees, otherwise known as working groups, as described in this policy, facilitate the operation of the school board and the school district. So we had some conversation around just some working definitions around task force versus committee versus working group. And George and Sarah, please chime in here, but I believe where we landed as a working group was that subcommittee and working group are interchangeable. Those are synonyms. We talked about a task force being more limited in its duration with a specific objective and goal in mind, and once that goal or recommendation has been met, that group disbands. So you'll see some of the changes that we made also in the language under 3C. Or the new C, D, and E. And I think that was it for that one, so you see that?
Okay, let's see.
Instead of establish, we said approve. And again, this is only the second reading, so as you continue to revisit this and you have other comments that you can send to us before we take action on this at the next meeting.
I'm trying to think, and please help me on this because I've gone through some of these. Is there a place in the various policies where it says that the chair will appoint the committee chairs and the committee members?
Yep.
Yeah, that's in the.
Okay, that part I get,
right now.
and that's always been, that's not new to me.
Yeah, it's B on
Top of
page.
Oh, do you have it? Top of page
213. Yeah,
213.
okay, that part, but it also seems to me there's a part in there that follows that says the board will approve.
Does.
So that doesn't change. So that if the chair appoints, that's separate from the board approving.
Here's what the two of them read, Mike. The school board chair shall appoint the members and designate the chair of each working group. Next one is, the school board will approve by resolution for each working group the members, the term, and the charge or mission of each such committee.
Okay.
Those are back to back.
Yeah. So that's all consistent here. That's what I'm asking. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, I believe we're almost done. 214, out-of-state travel by board members. The purpose of this policy is to control out-of-state travel by school board members as required by law. So we did, I think the comment was made about who approves the chair. We made that change to reflect that the vice chair, I believe. Yes. And then we also did some wordsmithing on 4 under reimbursable expenses that you'll see there.
And can you read that? for
Oh,
the
sure.
public, please?
Expenses to be reimbursed include transportation, meals, lodging, registration fees, required materials, parking fees, tips, and other reasonable and necessary school district-related expenses. We eliminated, or we're proposing to eliminate the word may, because we feel that this was in and of itself a rather exhaustive list, and it also is covered by other reasonable and necessary school district-related expenses. So there really was no greater latitude that we felt we had to extend.
Thank you. I had struck me as well.
Okay. Any other questions on 214? All right, the last in the series of 200, which is a board resignation vacancy. Did some formatting again. I believe that was the only real substantive change. Questions or comments around 215? Any questions? All right, that concludes the second reading of the remainder of the 200s.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. I appreciate that conversation. All right, let's move on to the second report, which is the first reading, the Series 300 Policies School District Administration. Again, the Policy Working Group. It's going to lead that, George.
Yeah, I guess we didn't decide who was going to do that because we weren't sure we were going to get there, or our board chair would let us keep this on the agenda, but since she has.
You're all in luck.
I'll just read quickly.
Again, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. First reading, this is the first one, 301, School District Administration. No changes were recommended by the Policy Working Group, other than erasing the cross-reference at the bottom. So there's, I mean, it's old language, basically. 302, we added superintendent.
Can we maybe read the purpose? Just read the purpose.
Say it again.
Read the purpose, just the purpose.
The purpose of that one is to clarify the role of school district administration and its relationship with the school board.
That's 301.
Yeah.
301.
301.
Good?
Yes.
302, purpose is to recognize the importance of the role of the superintendent and the overall responsibility of that position within the school district. Language added to be the superintendent shall annually evaluate each principal assigned responsibility for supervising a school building in the district consistent with statutory requirements. As we looked at those, they basically say, here's what the superintendent has to do in evaluating the principals. So nothing new. It was, that language just says the evaluation is consistent with statutory requirements. 303, the purpose of this policy is to convey to the school community that the authority to select and employ a superintendent is vested in the school board. Suggested language down on 4C, the school board shall provide the employment contract rather than just the contract for the superintendent. So only the word employment was added there. Everything else is old language. 304, purpose of this policy is to provide for the use of an employment contract with the superintendent, a position description, and the use of an approved instrument to evaluate performance. In 2A, additional language is the superintendent's contract shall be used to formalize the employment relationship and to specifically and identify and clarify all terms and conditions. And I think many of us have heard that phrase, terms and conditions, so really there's, that adds but doesn't change much of what we've been doing. C is taken out at the suggestion of legal. The school board may use the model contract approved by the boards of the Minnesota School Boards Association and the Minnesota Association of School Administrators as a model instrument. You know, it doesn't mean that we can't use those as a model. It just takes language out. I guess it makes it all shorter. You can still use them, but it's not in there as a policy. I don't know that there's anything different there. 305, the purpose of this policy is to clarify the responsibility of the school administration for implementation of school board policy. 2B, the phrase employee and student handbooks, the employees was taken out because from what I understand, we don't have employee handbooks. We do have student handbooks. They differ, some parts of them differ by building, but student handbooks, plural, shall be subject to annual review and approval by the school board. Under C, the words substantive changes within the handbooks shall be reviewed by the superintendent to assure compliance with school board policy and shall be approved by the school board. And you'll notice the change was going from changes of substance to substantive changes. Doesn't change the meaning, it just is better language. 306, purpose of this policy is to establish the requirements of the school board that school administrators adhere to the standards of ethics and professional conduct in this policy and Minnesota law. You may want to read A just to see that's probably where a few changes took place. Take a minute.
Which one's he talking about? This one, yeah. These are all changes. Oh, yeah, we just missed it. Okay.
just clarify, George, the blue with the underline, that was verbiage, you've got a single underline and a double?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Barb?
The blue, whether it's single or double, was an addition to the original language, where the red is a taking out of.
But there's no difference between a single line or a double line underneath the blue?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And this was at the recommendation of the policy work group and their...
No, this was from legal counsel. All
legal.
of these changes
That's right.
were specifically from legal counsel, and the blue additions, it looks like there's a lot, actually is adding in the code of ethics that is in statute.
Okay.
The draft policy was missing some of them.
Okay.
And so she added those in.
Great, thank you. Director Potacek?
If we can we go back to 305?
That Maggie wanted to take out.
So red was legal.
Things that we added based on her recommendation.
Red is taking out, blue is adding it. No, what red is taking out, blue is putting in.
I'm thinking this is not a dream team right now.
That's a shot.
I'm just kidding.
Civility.
I had to.
Yeah, disparaging remarks. Who do I talk to about policy?
Director Potacek had a question, George, about 305.
George, if we could, or the committee.
Sorry.
It seems to me there's a double negative in here that bothers me on 305, Roman numeral 2A.
He has to go back.
He has to go back to 305 for a
Yes, we went
minute.
too fast. Okay.
We did not.
205, 305.
305.
Okay, I'm there.
Okay, Roman numeral 2A. Let's see. Okay, it would be, I think, the third sentence. These guidelines and directives shall not be inconsistent. That's a double negative to me. Couldn't it just say shall be consistent rather than not be inconsistent?
Sure.
To me, it just, and I know you like simplicity.
I'm guessing that was a previous policy group. We are not going to take responsibility for that because there are no, that's
blame
not a
MSBA.
change. But we'll fix the previous policy group's
So
wording.
Omission.
Yeah.
305.
So it should just read, shall be consistent with said policies. Thank you.
Okay, back to 306.
Yeah, 306. So this, all the blue is currently in the Administrator Code of Ethics, and so it's now in our policy as well. I guess that's the best way to put it. And you see the legal references are the Code of Ethics and the Code of Ethics for School Administrators. So take a look at that, and if you have anything you want to question about that.
Yeah, I'm fine. I read through that. I read most of mine.
Is that it? Bingo,
Wow. Dream team. Mic drop.
sort of.
Really wish I had made that.
All right. Nice job. All right, we are going to move on to the next report, item C, which is a resolution reauthorizing referendum authority, and that is Ms. Holheisel.
Oh, there we go.
Board Chair Pelletier, Superintendent Pontrelli, school board members. Tonight, there is a resolution in front of you that I actually will plan and ask for approval at our August 23rd meeting. And we had talked about this at a learning session prior. I believe it was about a month or two ago. Approximately 5 years ago, legislation went into play that $300, it would allow districts to
for school boards to approve $300 in referendum authority. And what the intent of the legislation was is to give school districts who were unable to pass any referendum the opportunity to help equalize the money that they were collecting locally versus districts that were able to already collect that money. And to make that fair, where they had districts then that didn't have any authority, they could then establish at least a $300 base as opposed to nothing. But districts that already had $300 approved, $300 or more dollars approved in their local community, it would just be a retitlement and a reapportionment. That district wouldn't collect more money. And so when we went to the voters in 2013, we had gone past the $300 allowance. And so 5 years ago, the board had approved authorizing referendum authority, essentially moving that $300 from what the voters had already approved into the non-voter approved category. Now, I'm going to fast forward you to today. In the 2018 legislative session, it was recommended that the governor, it went both parties in the E12 omnibus spending bill that to do away with this reauthorization. They're saying it's not needed. Let's just move it into the general provisions if it's already adopted and not have to do this up to every 5 years. And because the E12 omnibus spending bill was vetoed, that language got vetoed as well. And so we, moving forward, to continue with this practice, it will be a request of the board to review the resolution of what was previously approved and reauthorize that for up to another 5 years. I would anticipate within the next 5 years legislation will move this into essentially a permanent category. Any questions for me? Any questions?
I'll ask, if we do this, it means how many dollars are reauthorized?
So it means we currently, $300.
Times?
Per pupil, right?
The number of kids?
Yes, per adjusted pupil.
What number? Say 8,000, just for...
I would say for math it's 9 just because of the weighting and whatever, but let's just say, so you have 2.7.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
2.7?
Yes. Right? Do I have my zeros right?
Is that 2.7 million?
Is it 270,000 or 2.7 million? I'm trying to do $300 times 9,000 in my head. 270,000.
Mm-hmm. Is it?
Bob, can you figure that for us?
300 times 9,000.
Yeah.
So
50.
2.7. Yeah.
It's 2.7.
2.7.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments?
So would this be subject to truth and taxation issues at all, or is this, once we decide this, it's done?
Once we decide this, it's done, but it doesn't change any dollar amount in our truth and taxation category. So what it does is so it switches it, and if you recall from the truth and taxation slides, you have net tax capacity, referendum market value, then you have voter approved and non-voter approved. Mm-hmm. It would stay, right now it's currently in the non-voter approved, even though our voters had approved it, the board shifted categories. Yep. It would stay in that non-voter approved category, but again, it has no tax impact to us because we're already doing it. And our voters had already approved it.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Director Potacek.
Couple questions. One, what happens if we don't?
It would go back into the voter-approved category, and it would be the same collection.
Okay, and what years, and it probably says that here, what years are we talking about?
It would start in payable 19. So 2018 pay 19 is the 1920 fiscal year for us, and it's next January collection year, next May and October for our taxpayers.
Any questions? I appreciate it. Lists here that contact person Kristen Hoheisel. So between now, it looks like it's going to come up as an action item at the August 23rd board business meeting. So I would, highly suggest any questions going to Kristen prior to that time.
I do have one more
Director
question.
Stiveland?
So we're taking this out of a voter-approved levy, and it has already been moved into the non-voter approved.
Yeah.
Does any of this decision have any impact on when we do need to go to a voter approved levy at some point in the next few years? This is up to 5 years?
Yes.
So probably sometime within those 5 years, we're going to be looking at a voter approved levy.
Yes.
How would this decision impact that?
So, well, there's multiple approaches. So first off, it's already non-voter approved because that is what the board chose to do. It will revert back. You could choose to do less years, so it all expires at, you could keep it in that category and say we're going to keep it there for 2 or 3 years. You don't have, it's up to 5.
Okay.
And then that way when you go to the polls, it would, it would revert back at the same time. So that's an option. If you chose not to renew this resolution, it would all go, which would mean it would all expire at the same time, and all of it would be on the table. Or you can choose to keep it as a non-voter approved category, of which time it will hold as non-voter approved, and that much wouldn't need to be renewed at the polls at that time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right.
Just,
Yep. George?
Is there a reason why it isn't August 9th? It's August 23rd?
August 9th, I will not be in attendance.
Sounds good.
All right. All right, thank you. Moving on.
Thank you.
Next item in the reports, last report, is a designation of legal counsel for 2018-2019, and that is Superintendent Pontrelli.
Thank you, Chair Pelletier. I'm going to attempt to provide some clarity that I think I may have caused some confusion in my board update. When we, first of all, I'm going to read the resolution that we have for this. If the board remembers, if we move back to the topic for this is really based on designation of any type of services for the district. And in January 4th, 2018, typically at the organizational meeting is when you've approved different vendors or providers of services. And so this year, I think is the second year we've done that. And we approved the financial auditor, environmental services, building controls, legal counsel, benefits counsel, and employee benefits counseling. Those vendors that we chose are ones that the district has used for many years. But we heard from our community members that they wanted us to go out and do requests for proposals for some of these services that we've had. And so in response to that community input, we gave you some examples of RFPs, including kind of to the extent possible, an outline of agreements for provision of services. The two that we shared with you are for legal services for the main services of the district and special education. We also talked about moving forward with a request for proposals for the financial auditor and construction managers, because those are two things that we anticipate we do every year. And why we approve these in January. But due to some of our community members asking us to go out and do the request for proposal process, we thought it more prudent to, when you're working with, for instance, the legal services, in the middle of the year in January, you already have legal services working on different cases for us, different issues and concerns. In the summer, there are some things, but not so much. So the board has it's really at your discretion how you want to do this. Many districts have a resolution where they list those vendors. You can do it every year. You can decide how often you want the administration to go out for a request for proposals for things. Obviously, if you're going to have a large project, you're going to do that anyway. In the case of examples for benefits consultants and employee benefits consulting that Kathy Moen has used for HR, those are things that those vendors we use consistently to do that work. And as a reminder of that, we use some of those vendors instead of having full-time employees. So what we're asking is a couple of things. With this, the board can have a conversation. We gave you two examples of some contracts and outlines for services from legal representation, one for main representation for the district, one for special education. And you can look at those and decide if you'd like to have a resolution. Peter Michael did prepare at the request of the board and based on community input last January, a resolution for us to use. And we have that for you. But really, I'd just like you to entertain a discussion about, is there something different in these proposals that you'd like to see than what we've provided? And is there any special order that you'd like us to go in as far as requesting these different requests for proposals? As I mentioned, we'd like to have the legal and special education legal done because we'll have students coming back and we'll need to know who to continue to use. And then any discussion you might want about other vendors or process or timing.
All right, any comments or questions? All right, Director Pearson.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for that. That helps a lot.
I was confused too.
I appreciate that. So I do have a question, something else I apparently was confused about. So I thought when we go out for RFPs, we go out to several.
We did.
Okay, but so you only just provided?
We just put two examples of, these are the two that we've used in the past.
Okay.
And for these two, actually, when you look at those proposals, for both Kennedy and Graven and for our main legal counsel and then Laura Booth Law, they've both provided excellent services for us for the last couple of years. You see all the terms and conditions laid out for their services. We'll work on, I know Kathy's working on getting some numbers from comparison so that you can see. In this kind of a case, your legal firms, they're aware of each other's fees for school districts, and they're pretty close in alignment. Occasionally, we will reach out to a different law firm if Kennedy and Graven doesn't cover something that the school district needs to cover. I know Director Hoheisel, I'm thinking of Dean Knudsen, has helped us in the past also. So the question is, your question is yes. And so these are two of them, and we have prices and things for you, but they're typically, when you look through those outline of services, they're pretty similar.
Okay. I think for my opinion would be, it'd be nice to have that, like when we get our construction RFPs, we see it all, but we still get the recommendation. And I have no problem with either one of these, but it's good to have it and be able to show people we looked at everything and these have been proven and we chose them. So,
are there things that were not listed in those because they have general information that they share with all districts? It's kind of a boilerplate about what most people want, but is there anything else specific that you want so that when we go out and have the conversation, when we come back, we have the information that you...
I think Sarah had a question.
George.
I only need price comparison. I have no problem with the quality of the work that we've been getting. It would be nice to see if they're in line with others. I was thankful that we got the list of other school districts that have them. I know I'm familiar with a number of these superintendents, and I trust that if they're doing it in their district, that they support the work that we've seen in our district. But it would be nice just to, even something similar to that little chart.
Sure.
And if, I would say if Kennedy and Graven is within line of that, they don't need to even be the lowest bidder. But if they're in line, we know the quality of their work. I have no problem. I don't need any more than that.
Okay. Director Potacek?
Yes, I've gone through what you gave us there, and I thank you for that. And it's, I think that's available for the public as well, so they can look at it. The question I had, and I'm not expecting an answer tonight, is a review of our legal cost over the last several years.
Right, you had mentioned legal cost and cost for data privacy FOIA requests, and we can do that. We just have been having several of us trying to take vacation,
and
so
I
bring that to the
sympathize
board.
with that,
Sure.
but I'm saying over the long run, that's a topic that people do ask us about, that they are concerned about, and I'm also concerned, and I think that's part of your intention, is to put those in categories. Obviously, even the two firms, one covers special education, et cetera. All of that, I think, would be informative.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Sarah?
Sure, yeah. I would like to repeat, I guess, what others have said, that especially the Kennedy and Graven proposal was incredibly thorough. It was really interesting. I thought that was great. So if we could have, I don't know, maybe some other ones too, maybe, I don't know, what would the normal thing would be. My question would be, how many years have we actually used these two firms? So, I mean, we've
I'd have to
said sort
look
of
too.
several or whatever.
Kathy can maybe share that with us.
15 years.
I don't know about Laura Booth, but it's been.
So, and the reason why I ask is, it just seems like to me that legal issues take time and there's a lot of things that are going on, and I wonder what it would involve. Switching to a new company, do you have to give that a large chunk of time? Do you have to transition somehow? I mean, I don't know how that works. It seems like it would be
That's a
little
really
bit challenging.
good question, especially if you were saying, if you're in the middle of any type of litigation, right? Another firm isn't going to want to come in and take over where somebody else has. So you'd have to have some type of a scaffolding where, we're going to finish up the work that we've started. I think the other piece for both of those firms is because they have worked with Stillwater for so long, they really know past history, where other firms might have to go and do research and figure out what's happened in the past and those kind of things. That incurs more cost when you have to do that. And so that is a good point. And I think then, finally, the third is especially with Kennedy and Graven, they have such a breadth that they can cover many different issues and they work together. And so it's not just one, you're really getting many people around an issue.
Thank you. Director Pearson?
I think to Director Stivlin's point, I would love just as part of that to be how long have we used whatever we're looking at, how long have we used our current? And then to have those, what Kennedy and Graven provided, the places that would give reference that they're already working in, just throughout, whenever we get a report, I'd like to see that too.
You mean this, where they're working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think
Director
that's really helpful.
Director Sevlin?
Do
you have another comment?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Do we need to put this in policy somewhere? That we
These are
want to review these from time to time, and how often?
Well, that's where the resolution, you could do that, and you can have a conversation about this. We'll make copies of this that Peter provided. This is based on what he's done for other districts, and it's fairly simple, just to do it at the annual organizational meeting. And maybe part of the conversation is if things are going well, you do it at your January organizational meeting. And then at that time, if you, for some reason, say, you know what, we'd really like to try something else for some reason, or if we have a larger project coming up, then you could do that. Yeah, so it's something annual that you would do either in January, or you could decide to do it at the beginning of the fiscal year in July.
And so again, and I suspect this will come up at the next business meeting that we have, but when does this one actually run out?
They don't.
They don't.
Not typically. I mean, because
it's
for many of these-
continual unless you take a position.
Right, because many of them, we can't predict, especially with legal services, you can't predict how long that's going to be. I mean, you could say we're going to be done July 1st, but you're going to have a case, you'll have something that's going to go past that. So typically, that's why the board would look at this in January at the organizational meeting and say, yes, these people are in good standing. It's what we've always known, and we are happy. After you look at all of these and look at our legal, and you have a number of RFPs to look at that are similar to this, and you say, yes, this is the person we want to go to, then you can decide, yep, we'll review that every year, and maybe it's every second year or third year that you want to go back and look at that.
Thank you.
All right. Any others? To Sarah?
I was so impressed by the Kennedy and Graven proposal. They seem like they do handle the work of quite a few districts, so they must be very well respected. But sometimes what goes hand in hand with that is they might be more expensive. So I wonder if we could, when we're looking for comparables, we could make an effort to really try to find the bargain basement comparison, just to see. Not that we would want to choose that, because you want, really good, you definitely want good legal services, but just to see what the range is.
Anything else? All right, and just lastly here, this will come up. Action on the designation of legal counsel for 2018-19 school year will be requested at the August 9th, 2018 board meeting. And contact person for further questions will be Superintendent Pontrelli directly.
And Chair Pelletier, one of the things with this resolution, we'll be taking a couple at a time. So hopefully by the time we get to January, you have your list, and then in January you can review this and say yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're moving on. Action items. Action item 11A, School Board Vacancy Appointment Resolution. That is me. Just very, very quickly, I'll do just a brief summary for the public. Yesterday, we held about 5 hours of interviews. We had 9 applicants for this, the position that was open due to Chair Lehman's new position as a judge. And we had just some truly remarkable candidates all around. The process went very smoothly, and we, after the interviews were finished, we worked together on finding the best way to whittle it down and to find our candidate. I think we worked together very well on that. There were suggestions made, and it went very well. I was very, very proud of the work of this board yesterday. And at the end of the day, we were so happy to determine that Mr. Don Hovland be our appointee for this position. Just on a personal level, this is a gentleman who has given so much to the district as years as a principal at Stillwater Middle School. And what struck me on a personal level was he kept saying he wanted to give back. And I told Director Potacek, you know, I think he's given so much and he wants to continue to do so. The pride in this district was all over his face in that interview. So it was a great day. It was a great moment. And we're so excited to have him. So I am going to read the resolution appointing school board member and calling for a special election to fill a vacancy. All right. So whereas on June 22nd, 2018, the School Board of Independent School District number 834 declared a vacancy to exist on the school board following a resignation of board member Tom Lehman. And whereas the vacancy position expires on the first Monday of January 2019. And whereas upon the existence of vacancy, Minnesota Statute 123B.09, Subdivision 5B, requires the school board by resolution to appoint an individual to serve in the vacant position until an individual is elected by special election at the time of the next general election. And whereas the school board has completed the process to consider applicants to serve in the vacant school board position. And whereas the school board has determined that Donald G. Hovland is an individual who is eligible and qualified to serve in the vacant position until a successor is elected by special election at the time of the next general election. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 834 that Donald G. Hovland is hereby anointed to fill the vacant position and serve on the school board until a special election is held and a successor qualifies for office. The appointment shall be effective on the 31st day following this resolution, absent receipt of a valid petition rejecting the appointee in compliance with the requirements under Minnesota Statute 123B.09, Subdivision 5B. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the school board declares that a special election for the vacant school board position shall be held in conjunction with the school board's next regular general election. I am at this time going to seek a motion and a second for this resolution.
I'll move. I'll second.
All right. Director Pearson, seconded by Director Sarah Stivlin. Could I please have a call for a vote? All those in favor, raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. The resolution is duly declared and adopted. Thank you very much. We're so excited to have him. Look forward to it. All right. Moving on, we are on to B, election filing dates resolution, and that is Ms. Prue.
Good evening, Board Chair Pelletier, members of the board, and Superintendent Pontrelli. Tonight, I bring before you a resolution to establish the dates for filing for school board. As you know, we have 4 spots open on the board that will be on the ballot on the November 6th election, and this is the first step that begins the election process. And with that, I would ask approval.
All right, any comments or questions? All right, seeing no, could I have...
Should we say what they are for the record?
I think it'd be good
That's fine.
for the public to hear.
Absolutely. So the resolution is, be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District 834 in the state of Minnesota as follows. The period for filing affidavits of candidacy for the office of School Board Member of Independent School District 834 shall begin on July 31st, 2018 and close at 5 p.m. on August 14th, 2018. An affidavit of candidacy must be filed in the office of the school district clerk, and there is a $2 filing fee paid prior to 5 p.m. on August 14th. The clerk is hereby authorized and directed to cause notice of said filing dates to be published in the official newspaper of the district at least 2 weeks prior to the first day to file for candidacy. That notice has been published in the Gazette. You could have seen it last Friday. It will be in there tomorrow. The clerk is hereby authorized and directed to cause the said notice to be posted in the administrative offices of the district at least 10 days prior to the filing period, and those notices have been posted in all of our buildings. And then you have an example of what the notice looks like.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Potacek.
And both of those, August 31st is a Tuesday.
July
31st is a Tuesday, and August 14th is also.
It's a 14-day filing period, I believe.
Okay, and that's very similar to what it's been in the past.
Absolutely. That's determined by the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to
I'll
approve the
second.
resolution.
Whoever, I don't care. I'll second.
All right. Motion by Director O'Loughlin with a second by Director Pearson. All those in favor, raise your hand and signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? No. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Prue. All right. Action item 11C, long-term facility maintenance plan. Ms. Holheisel.
Good evening again. I just wanted to follow up. I happened to take the opportunity to review the school board meeting on the 21st in which Mr. Wilger had presented, and I'd like to formally thank him for a job well done. One of the questions that had come up was from Director Pearson as it relates to the financing and not quite being able to figure out with the revenue side and then the expenditure side. So I wanted to address that before I go into the documents.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So what happens is we have to, because the levy cycle is essentially, well, certainly a year ahead of itself, but the planning's almost 2 years ahead of itself, we have to declare what we believe is going to be the revenue we need to support the projects that we're going to do in that particular year. So we're estimating in advance. And if you look, ideally, what would happen is, and I'm just going to use round numbers, ideally, if we said we're going to spend $5 million, and we want $5 million in revenue for any given year, that's what's going to go on our levy. On the next page, on the expenditure side, it's going to say, and we're going to spend that $5 million that year. That's in a perfect world. Now is where timing comes into it, because we actually collect the revenue far in advance of when we actually spend the dollars, just given, again, how the levy cycle works. We've collected $5 million, but due to the timing of the projects, we only spent $3 million in that particular year. You start to see, so technically our expenditures kind of maintain. We assume, I mean, you'll see the ebb and flow, but the goal is that we hold the $5 million. The same thing happens with the revenue. And I know Mr. Wilger had mentioned, back in the day, before long-term facility maintenance came in and we were just an alternative facility district, there was almost a reconciliation project to page 8, and so it wasn't public. Like the state would say, okay, we see that, they only based the revenue we collected off of the expenditures we recorded. In essence, there was an offset in the levy. That same thing is happening, but you're now seeing it. So if we collected $5 million but only spent $3 million, and the state knows we've only spent $3 million, they're going to have a negative adjustment on this coming year's levy. They're going to say, we're going to take $2 million away from you because you didn't spend it. Which then we artificially, then we need to say, okay, but we know it's going to be spent the next year, so it artificially inflates that revenue category for the next year. The net is even, but that negative adjustment, because they're reading old data to catch up what we've actually spent and gets reported, that's on our levy sheet, and so our revenue actually inflates $2 million. So it looks like $7 million. So they don't match when you're looking at it. As you look out future years in the plan, it's level. That's our intent. That's what we plan on doing. But how it's reported in the levy system, with their negative offset, or quite honestly, if it was vice versa, what would happen is, let's say we spent more than we collected. Let's say we actually spent $6 million and only collected $5 million. They're going to put, well, in this case, we actually request it, but what they used to do is they would put another $1 million out there and, to catch up to our expenditures. It's a little different now, but behind the scenes, there's a balancing that's happening, and so you can't quite equate in the 2 years you're looking at, both 18 and 19, those numbers aren't tying, and that's why. Does that make sense?
It does. And so when I look at that 10-year, the 10-year revenue and the 10-year expenditure, the revenue looks to me like it's pretty flat at $3.5 million. But then expenditure is always higher than that. So that's where my confusion was when I look at that 10-year page. Mm-hmm. Because the expenditures, we only have 1 year at $3 million. Otherwise, it's usually $5 million. Mm-hmm. So that's where I was confused. Because it doesn't feel like it really... Revenue is staying pretty flat at 3.5, and then expenditure is pretty flat at 5. So that's where I'm confused about. Where's the other 1.5 million coming from? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does. And I'm trying to find the line that you can look at on the revenue side that actually. If you look at, and I'm going to ask you to turn to the long-term facility maintenance 10-year revenue projection. And if you look at line 62, so it's the second page, that number should match with the exception of, your current year estimates.
Okay.
So it's the last thing on the revenue page. The last series of numbers.
That makes sense. So I was looking at the bottom of the first page, but I need to go all the way to the...
You need to go to the back where it says the total general fund levy, of which you will see, once we kind of get past the 2 years of nuance, if you will, then you're essentially asking the same as your plan on spending.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And so with that, you have 4 documents in front of you tonight, a statement of assurances, a resolution, and then the long-term facility 10-year expenditure plan and the 10-year revenue plan, and I am seeking adoption of those this evening. Again, as Mr. Wilger had stated and you had discussed, it's a plan. Sometimes the project changes. We try to keep the dollar amount as even as possible because of our taxpayers. This is a category where if the levy comes in, to Director Stivlin's point, to her point earlier, is this a category that we can adjust the levy as we move? This is one we can. You can, if we look at the levy in the board, we can't go up, but we can go down. So if the board has heartburn about the way it's looking, usually this is kind of our spigot that we adjust if we need to once we're looking at numbers in September.
Okay. Thank you. Should we open it up for comments and questions? Anyone? Director Stivlin?
So I'm I'm looking at, I understand where you're saying that the timing of the projects really does fluctuate, and these numbers can kind of go up and down, but it sort of does seem like on that line 62, and I was looking at this on the expenditure side, I see it as well. There is a kind of a big bump listed for 2020. Is that for something specific?
No, that's actually the year in which, because again, we're doing this in 18, pay 19, 20. It's truly the timing of how, it's the end of the 1920 school year, which is actually the year we're levying for. So this is where we're talking about, we know we didn't spend enough in this fiscal year. And I shouldn't say spend enough. The projects weren't completed in this fiscal year. They're moving to the next fiscal year, which shifts everything ultimately to the collection of 19. It hits 2 years later because of the revenue side, not the expenditure side.
Okay.
Because
So
again, we collect revenue early.
Which projects are they? Like, can you say, or is it just like a whole?
It's a large sum of them, in part because we had purposefully piggybacked alternative facility projects with the bond to get the biggest bang for our buck. We had contractors on site, and so some of the honestly, and I believe. That we just ran out of time to be able to do identified projects that weren't happening in construction zones.
Okay.
So I can't say an itemized list right now. I can say you can assume that the schools that weren't under construction probably had a little bit of delay in what we had hoped to get done with versus the manpower to be able to do it.
That makes sense.
Anyone else? Director Potacek?
I had a lot of questions, and if you've watched it, you've seen them. But one that it particularly intrigues me, and I'm very interested in it, was I looked at the individual schools and a lot of the projects and what was being spent. And Tony, I asked in particular about some very large expenditures that were occurring at Lake Elmo. I'm not opposed to that at all. In fact, quite reversed, I asked him, and I want to get your feeling as well. It seems to me that even with those large investments at Lake Elmo, that we haven't brought it to where it should be.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering down the line, not necessarily for this approval, but it's a related item. What would it take for us at some future point, please share with us what it would take to get Lake Elmo to a higher standard? So that sometimes what happens in our boundaries and all of that, there are people who live down in that neck of woods who drive by Brookview, where they thought they were going to be going, and they end up at Lake Elmo, and that bugs them. Now, I can realize everybody likes the shiny new building, and I have some sympathy for that. But what I want to make doesn't happen is that we don't have a top-notch facility in Lake Elmo is what it should be. And so what I'm asking for future consideration is price, projects, what would it take to bring them up to a higher standard? Okay.
Thank you for the comment. I agree with that, Director Potacek. I think over and above the idea of the shiny new building, this is a building that is always full, and it seems like it's the last one to get taken care of. So I appreciate the comment, and we should consider this on a grander scale going forward. Director O'Loughlin, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just to piggyback on that, because I know that those were some of the comments and questions or discussion rather, that came up when we were discussing the bond. And I think for me, the bigger question, because I'm in total agreement with everything you say, is how we're going to pay for it.
And again,
because I think we
Yes.
can have an amount, right? She can come with us with here's what to bring it up to snuff, so to speak, is what I hear you saying of what it should be, and then what?
And I do have some ideas on that, but we'll leave that for another time. I just want to know what the need is and what it would take. And then obviously it's for us, the administration as well, to discuss how do you get there?
Good points. Director Stivlin.
So to that point, I think I'm really glad you brought that up. I really am. It's something that's been on my mind for a long time, too. So in terms of this long-term facilities maintenance, this is something we have to approve every year. It's a 10-year plan, but every year you bring it back to us, we look at it, and we say, okay, that looks great. How would we, because I don't know what you're thinking of in terms of, what specific things, how would we encourage that focus on Lake Elmo? Like, what would that process look like? If that's something that we as a board really want to encourage us looking at, is that something you could bring us, this is the list of things that really need to be done, or here are some options, and would we then change what we have in our 10-year plan and to pull things off of this list that are here now?
You would have to start prioritizing differently. Yes. So the simple answer is yes, if you were looking at maintaining, and I'll say in this particular category, tax neutrality. Or if, if you had another funding mechanism, then no. But assuming you didn't, then yes.
Pull things off of the list that are on here now and trade them out for things that maybe aren't there now.
Correct. And with that, and with one site, it's not that it's easy, but at least the scope is contained, and you had talked about that with policy, like give some direction, because it's hard when you have a concept and are you talking get rid of the portables and add on to the building? That can get quite large, and maybe that is, but at least the focal point is one building as opposed to are we looking at multiple buildings, because then that's a significant amount of work and would require a significant amount of direction of exactly what you'd want to see. I believe I understand what you're looking for.
Yes, yes. And I'm saying one source is long-term. Another source, there are other options that are there. Now, again, a lot of times it's trade-offs.
Director O'Loughlin?
Well, and I think that Superintendent Pontrelli, she's brought this to us on numerous occasions, and I think that's part of, the work that we're doing with Dennis Cheesebro to look at this in tandem with the growth and the needs, because I think one only need to look, not very far and see that there's going to be a middle school that is going to need some conversation about capacity, and with all the growth in the South. So I think it's a both and, being able to have those conversations complementary, so that we can be really thoughtful and purposeful about what the long-term planning is for the buildings.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Director Pearson?
So on a different subject, can this only be used on school buildings, or can it be used on admin and bus garage, things like that?
It, as stated in June, it has to be like for like. So we can't create off of it. If it exists and it needs repair, replacement, whatever, then we can do that. You can, there's a nuance where you can upgrade if you have a 50-year-old system and there's no way you can put another 50-year-old furnace in it. There's some upgrades that just come, but it has to be like for like. We do not have the flexibility to add something that isn't there. That said, it's anything district.
Okay. So is there anything, maybe there's nothing at the bus garage that would be like for like, everything that is needed there is new?
Well, the bus garage would not, you're talking
the new.
Correct.
So there's nothing in here at this point?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? All right. I think we are ready to look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the long-term facility maintenance plans for the 2019-2020 school year.
And a second, please.
I'll second that.
Seconded by George Heppener. All those in favor of...
Can I ask a question quick?
Yep, question.
Are we just approving for 1 year, or are we approving the 10-year plan?
So you're approving the 10-year plan, but again, we update it every year.
Okay. So I don't know if the motion needs to reflect that it's the whole 10-year.
Okay, I just read what was on the...
Well, there's really a long resolution. Is that supposed to be read?
Does the resolution need to be read? Good
idea. Good idea.
Does the resolution need to be read? I'll just read it.
That is the plan. The way you read it is appropriate, but because they will use this for the levy. So you're approving it for this coming levy cycle, but they need a 10-year plan
Okay.
to approve for that levy cycle. So you're achieving the 10-year plan with the way it's worded.
Okay, thank you.
The resolution does not need to be read. We just need to include it in the packet when you submit it to the UVARs, right?
Okay, all right, are we ready for the vote? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, I am going to ask that we take a 5-minute break before moving on to policy. Oh, goodness gracious. There we go. Okay. All right, back from our break, we are on to action item number 11D, Series 200 Policy School Board Policy Working Group, and that will be George Hepner.
We have, over the past 2 board meetings, discussed the Series 200 policies. We've had a first and second reading, and our policy says that we will subsequently vote on these tonight then. I'm sure board members have had certainly enough time to look through them all. What we're asking for approval now is 201 to 208. The policies we talked about earlier this evening are not included. These are all policies that have been previously discussed. So I'm going to move that we adopt the Series 200 policies. I'll look for a second, and then if there's any discussion, it can be had at that time.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion on 201 to 208?
Director Potacek?
Yeah, my concern happens to deal with 208. All of the others, I don't have any issues with.
Okay, before we talk about it, is there any other issue that we would pull off of this thing? Other than 208? Going once, going twice? Okay, what I'm going to ask for then is approval of 201 through 207, and then we'll take 208 separately.
Perfect.
I guess you're going to ask for approval of those.
All right, so can I have a motion to approve Series 201 to 207, please?
I'll move.
Well, we changed the motions, or we changed the, I don't care.
Isn't that?
We changed it from 2 to 208.
We're amending the motion?
We're amending the motion.
Amending the motion.
Right, so George, do you approve amending your motion?
Sure.
To Series
Yep.
201 to 207? And does the second remain? Director O'Loughlin, I think you made the second?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we are ready for the vote to approve Series 201 to 207. All those in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No, that motion carries unanimously, and now we go to the next one, 208.
The question I have, as it's written, I don't have any opposition to what's in there. I do have a concern that there's an omission, because what this particular policy has to do with is the development, adoption, and implementation of policies. And I think what the whole series does a nice job about talking how policies recommendations can come from the administration, policy recommendations or initiation can come from the working group members. What it doesn't do that I would like for consideration, and I'm not going to hold up 208 because of that, is what about the other 4 board members? Is there any way that they have formed?
Okay, can you look at Roman numeral 3C?
Yeah.
I can read it for you, Mike. It says, policies may be proposed by a school board member, employee, student, or resident of the school district.
Okay, I'm good then. That's what I was looking for.
I would make a motion to approve policy 208.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All those any more discussion? No? All those in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
I'm just saying, George and I don't have to meet in the parking lot.
No disparaging words.
All righty. Just have 1 second here. Next, we are on to board member reports. And I'm going to, board chair reports, I'm going to start with mine as board chair and the evaluation summary of Superintendent Pontrelli. The school board of District 834 recently held 2 closed sessions to discuss the superintendent's annual evaluation. In between the 2 closed sessions, each board member filled out a written evaluation which related to 4 broad areas identified as superintendent goals. They are as follows: school board relations, management and leadership of the schools, oversight and evaluation of educational and operational functions of the district, and representation of District 834 to the external and internal communities. The following is a general summary of the strengths and areas for improvement that board members noted in their comments. Strengths noted in goal number 1. Her successful alignment of the world's best workforce and board's results policy to the strategic plan. Her successful implementation of pre-K in every elementary school. Her ability to navigate through difficult terrain of a board that is supposed to but doesn't always speak in one voice. And the addition of learning sessions upon the request of the board. Suggested areas of growth include a consistent review and communication of programs such as ALC and Spanish immersion, financial concerns related to salaries, decline of fund balance, and transportation. Strengths in goal number 2 include her increased presence in the community at large and in the schools, and across the board support from leadership pertaining to the direction she is taking, which the board received in the form of a letter signed by all principals. Leadership and follow-through of the mental health initiative and successful implementation of the sick bank, something that has been talked about for 15 years yet not implemented until now. Suggested growth includes a desire for heightened focus to work with principals in schools that are experiencing difficulties, such as Anderson Elementary, continual follow-up, and updates with families that lead to a report back to the board, as well as finances. Among the strengths of Goal 3 were her unflinching focus on teaching and learning, whether it be supporting literacy initiatives, BAR, Web, Link Crew, and growing relationships with the SCEA. Her work to encourage additional study where needed, such as the bell time discussions and the addition of the inclusion of the superintendent's report at board meetings. Suggested growth included a desire for some administration presentations to play a conversational role, with the example given as a dyslexia topic that came up this spring. Strengths in Goal 4 included her professionalism in difficult times, the stability she provides, her increasing presence in the community, her willingness to listen with examples given such as dyslexia, bell times, mental health, and others, and her unwavering positivity. Growth areas include a desire to continue reaching out to community members, utilizing the new formed community engagement group to help drive engagement, and to listen and respond with dissenting viewpoints with intention, empathy, and follow-up. In summation, this past year has been rich with transition, a dramatically changing physical landscape, and increasing challenges that stretch our budgetary dollar more than ever before. Despite these challenges, District 834 experienced countless examples of triumphs this past year in academics, athletics, and the arts. We as a board are passionate advocates of this great district and community it serves. We look forward to working in tandem with Denise as she strives to build on the initiatives that have been created, and we are excited to take this momentum to the next level in the year to come. Thank you. All right, I am ready to move on to board member reports. I'll start down there. Director Pearson?
I have nothing.
Director Hepner?
You have the EMID board minutes from June 20th in your packets. I just want to highlight one thing. The board heard from Executive Director Lubke that Regina Seabrook has been hired to replace Mary Bussman, who recently took a principal position in the Roseville District. Ms. Seabrook will work with professional development programming. She is teacher, principal, and superintendent licensed, as well as having certificates in order to facilitate AVID, IDI, and seed work. She will be introduced to the board at the August board meeting. And the rest, I think, is pretty self-explanatory.
Great. Director Stiblen?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Okay. Director O'Loughlin?
There's nothing to report.
Director Potacek?
I have three things I'd like to share very quickly. Each board member I sent a copy of this to is that they have a legislative committee meeting that's coming up on Tuesday, August 14th from 9:30 to 11 o'clock. No registration is required for that, but any board member who's interested can attend and observe, any administrator actually as well. And so I wanted to make that known, and you all have copies of that. Then also I sent you, or forwarded would be more correct, a list of the general membership meeting schedule for 2018-19, and there's about 6-7 meetings in there, and the dates and the time and the place of all of that. Then last but not least, 9/16, I received an email today, and we have a director of finance who has decided, we had just gone through a transition in April, and the person who occupies that right now has been commuting ever since, and has decided that she wanted to be closer to home, so she has taken a position in Elk River. Since that time, we have her replaced by a fellow by the name of John Van Overen, who was at the School Finance Division at MDE, and he also had been, prior to that, he served 4 years in multiple supervisory role at New York City's Office of Management and Budget. So again, that office is going through some transition for us, and sometimes those are problems. And so we're working with that, but I think we're in confident hands. Okay?
All right, thank you. Working group reports.
Policy working group meeting week from Friday. If you have any suggestions for the 200s or the 300s, last part of the 200s and all of the 300s, please send them to us. Use Sarah's grid, and that'll help a lot.
Director O'Loughlin.
So at the last finance working group, we had a discussion about the ways in which the board could possibly start identifying the cuts to programming and or staff in order for us to reach a balanced budget. So I sent an email dated, it was 3 days ago. So let me know if you have any questions about that. We're hoping to have this conversation start in September. The reason for that was twofold. It will allow our new board member, Mr. Hovland, to participate and let his voice be heard, and also provide Superintendent Pontrelli and her team enough time to help gather the information that the board needs to make an informed decision about how we want to guide this critical conversation.
Thank you.
A question
Potacek?
related to that, I don't need an answer tonight, but a consideration. Does Mr. Hovland then take the spots that Tom Lehman formerly had in terms of working groups, committee appointments? And I don't need an answer as much as...
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. That was my interpretation, but thanks for that reminder. I'll look into that and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
All right, well, I will just say the community engagement working group has had a lackluster performance by its current leader, Jennifer Pelletier. We are still, however, very excited about our intentional engagement, and this will be a focus within the next week or so. So thank you. All right, I do believe we are finished. I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.